6:31 p.m., November 1st, 2023. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Mr. Dorholt, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And then when you're ready, can you please call roll?
And the following board members are present at the District Administration Office. Scott Andresen.
Here.
Natalie Copeland.
Here.
Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Zach Dorholt is here. Shannon Haas.
Here.
Monica Shigera-Schwartz.
Here.
Heather Weems.
Here.
And the following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office. Superintendent Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education Dr. Jason Harris, Assistant Superintendent of PK5 Education Nikki Hansen, Assistant Superintendent of E12 Education Services Dr. Mike Rivard, Executive Director of Community Education Adam Holm, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations Tracy Flinbow, Executive Director of Operations Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Research Enrollment and Assessments Don Roper, Director of Community Engagement and Communications Tammy DeLand, Media Technicians Paul Novak and Gordy Scott, and custodian on site tonight is Evan Voss.
Thank you. Then I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting and work session agenda.
So move.
I have a motion by Scott, a second by Natalie. Zach, can you call vote again?
Monica Shigera-Schwartz,
Yes.
Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Zach Dorholtz, yes. Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Heather Weems.
Yes.
Then we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of personnel staff changes. Item B, approval of monthly financial report for September 2023. Item C, approval of monthly treasurer's report for September 2023. Item D, Board Policy 425, Staff Development and Mentoring, third reading. Item E, Board Policy 624, Online Instruction as revised. And item F, approval of Crush Gymnastics Co-op. At this time, does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So move.
And do I have a second? I have a motion by Scott and a second by Heather. Zach, can you call vote again?
And, Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Heather Weems,
Yes.
Monica Shigera-Schwartz.
Yes.
Shannon Haas.
Yes.
And Zach Dorholtz, yes.
Thank you. Moving on to information items. We have one information item tonight. It is the Crush Gymnastics Co-op presented by Dr. Lori Putnam, our superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Haas, members of the board. I'm glad to be able to talk a little bit about the Crush Gymnastics Co-op and grateful for AD Club Hockey and AD Heine who have joined us from Apollo and Sauk Rapids Rice. So grateful for your being here tonight to play backup in case I need it. A bit ago, the Sauk Rapids School District came to us to share some challenges they were having around staffing. They had done numerous outreach efforts and were unable to find a coach for their gymnastics team. They asked us if we would be able to take a look. We explored a variety of options that did not include co-oping, but ultimately they were would have ended up being violations of the scrimmage league, the scrimmage rule for the State High School League. And after exploring that, as well as some other staffing and co-oping options, we did as a team decide that this would be a good move for both of us. Typically, we would not be discussing co-ops in a singular event. We've had several already happen this year, alpine skiing. But the reason we're talking about it this evening, or that I'm sharing this information publicly, is that we have not yet done a co-op because of staffing. Typically, they're done because of student athlete numbers and the need to be able to provide opportunities to compete. And although this is a staffing issue, we also believe that at its heart, it is about making sure that students, athletes have opportunities to compete. And so we are glad to be able to be good partners, good neighbors to Sauk Rapids and invite them into this co-op. But of course, it will last 2 years, and then we'll look to reevaluate. We did spend a great deal of time working with our coach, our ADs, to make sure that the opportunities would be real opportunities for both districts. And after working with our coach particularly, when I had the opportunity to talk to each of you, but as Heather, who has great expertise in this area, reminded me, at the end of the day, we trust our coaches. And so after talking to the coach, he had 100% confidence in his coaching team's ability to keep our athletes safe, all of our athletes safe, and make sure that there were plenty of opportunities both at the varsity and increased opportunities at the JV level for our students. So after receiving those assurances and talking with Superintendent Bergstrom about our appreciation for the reciprocity if we are ever in this situation, and he is a great guy, a great leader, and I'm confident, and he assured me that he would also be a good partner and good neighbor to us if we were ever in this situation. And in this market, this labor market, we know that we could very easily be here. In fact, have been very close already this year. And so we are really glad to be able to combine our teams and create a great opportunity. And our conference was on board. And so we are very appreciative of this board's support and our coaches' support and our family support. We did offer multiple communications and the opportunity for our families, Sauk Rapids families, to come meet with the coaches, the ADs, that we did not have any families take us up on that offer, and no families have expressed concerns to this point. And should they have any concerns as the season arises, our ADs, our coaches, and Assistant Superintendent Harris are more than glad to support concerns should they arise. So that is the reason that we're talking tonight, and we're really excited to see what the future holds for the Crush Gymnastics Co-op.
Thank you. Any questions? Moving along. Scott?
It looks like we got the ADs here. Could they maybe speak a little bit? I'd like to hear what they have to say too.
Yeah, I guess we've gone through the process like Dr. Putnam has said, and really opened up the opportunities for our families and worked through our coach, Joel Starkaz, to really help in that communication process and leaned on him in communicating with the families that he's usually working with. And we've kind of tried to go through all the avenues that Dr. Putnam stated earlier. We do feel like we got a great program that can support this and have the opportunity to be able to support and give those opportunities to Sauk Rapids in that instance here.
We couldn't be more appreciative. Hard to explain all the different steps that we went through and all the things that we tried to do to go find those people. And in the world that both Carl and I and our activities directors and our staffing and our principals and our schools are doing, challenging at times to find staff, and unfortunately we weren't able to find someone. We know that it's a strong program, and we feel really good that we get to partner and be part of the Crush. I'm excited to go buy a Crush Gymnastics shirt now, which will be great. I really am, genuinely. I mean, it's a hard spot. We wanted this opportunity for the group of girls who have spent a lot of time in our community. It was heartbreaking to not be able to provide that for them within our own building, but couldn't be more appreciative, and our community feels the same way for that opportunity for girls to continue to have that. And like we said, we can reevaluate and look at that in the future to make sure it's good for both, for all parties involved, we want that. But right now, we're just excited to have that opportunity for our kids and to contribute then to the St. Cloud Crush in any way we can to make sure that Sauk Rapids Rice is holding up our end of the bargain and making sure that it's a great experience for not just our girls, but for all the girls involved in that program. So we're thankful. I appreciate this board being willing to let us take part in that. And we'll do our darndest to be great stewards of gymnastics in this area.
Thank you guys for being here too.
Thank you.
Al?
Just to be real clear, what schools participated in the crush? It's 3 schools? No, 4.
Yeah, so it would be St. Cloud Tech, St. Cloud Apollo, St. Cloud Cathedral, and now the addition of Sauk Rapids would be 4. Yeah. And we have gone through the process of addressing our conference and our section and have been approved by those parties as well. So
My question was going more down, there isn't any other small, like Christian schools or something around that are participating. It's just the 4 schools down.
correct.
Thank you.
Are we still in the same, well, we're still in the same conference. Are we still in the same sections then? Who does that bring in then?
So right now, we're in the middle of the, we're in a 2-year period, so we would stay where we're at currently. And we are already in the highest class in gymnastics, so that would not bump us into any other classes. We would currently stay in the same section, in the same class. It would just now be, instead of the 8 teams, down 1 team, so.
Oh, okay. I know it's complicated, or at least it is for me, so,
That's a great question.
okay. Anything else? Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then moving on to discussion and action items. Again, only one item there. It's a discussion item tonight, but then coming back, I think, next round for an action item. It is the 2024 Board of Education Legislative Platform presented by Board Member Zach Dorholt.
Caught me off guard. It is in front of you, I believe. I'm going to copies
Yes.
print out. Really sent out for some feedback, and I think most of the feedback was to kind of continue with where we have been, which is the primary goal of closing the special education cross-subsidy, that gap. The legislature did take some significant steps forward that did help a lot. At the same time, still not living up to their promise. So the main ask is to eliminate the special education ELL cross-subsidy and increase special education funding to a point that fully funds the state share of the cross-subsidy. Currently, I feel like the last biennium or last budget, well, our current, before our special education budget was about 40.5 million, now it's about 43 million. Our cross-subsidy for the 23-24 school year is expected to be a little over 7 million, which is better than the 12 million we were at before, so there's progress. But this still is roughly equal to about $768 per student, and it was at 1,340. So we appreciate the efforts made, yet I do believe, and I think the rest of us believe, that it's still a very significant problem, and we now know throughout the state, it's not just a problem for 742. This is growing throughout the state. You know, years ago, it was not really much of a thing on the radar, but thanks to the efforts of current and previous school board members here and others, it's a big deal, and people are seeing it and recognize it. So I think it's worth continuing to drive this issue home until it's completely covered. So what you have in front of you, I just haven't plugged, I just got the new updated numbers for our budget, which I just mentioned, but they are not plugged into this here. So.
Okay. And again, this is just a discussion tonight, and next board meeting, correct, we formally adopting it and voting on it? Is that correct? So does anybody have any questions or feedback or comments about this? Scott?
It looks like we're just sticking to the one item on this legislative platform rather than other items such as charter schools or whatever.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was the feedback I got. I mean, we could go complex, big and bold. But I think the emphasis here is, yes, legislature, you made some effort. No, it was not enough, and you're not living up to your promise. So keeping this as the primary goal, because this is our gap. This is many other districts' gap. So that's where we're at for now.
Al?
Zach, the very first paragraph, and he probably took it right from last year's, so it was confusing last year too. But I think when we right after the quote, right after the Constitution, says, it talks about St. Cloud District 742 is a unique district with 69.9% free and reduced lunch, 22.9 special education, and 22.5 EL populations. These demographics present challenges to our district that make it difficult to provide a quality education for all of our students without adequate funding. Yet District 742 continues to focus on and work towards the world's best workforce goals. It's a little bit confusing to me in there because we're mixing a lot of stuff. We're mixing free and reduced lunch in with special education and EL. And there isn't a free and reduced lunch cross-subsidy. It's the EL and the special education that create the cross-subsidy. The high levels of free and reduced lunch within our school district create some special programming needs for regular education, but not necessarily it's not necessarily special education right there. But because of the EL and the special education cross-subsidy, it takes funding away from us, and we're a district with high free and reduced lunch, which means that we are a more expensive district to operate because we need additional programming and special supports for those students. And the cross-subsidy is eating away from us. To me, it's a little confusing to lump that right in with the other two as a cause of the underfunding. The underfunding from the two creates a special circumstance with the third more, and regular programming, and activities and athletics and everything else. It's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alan. As I recall, I think I was on the legislative committee when I got on the board 5 years ago. And, there used to be, I think, 3 different things underneath, and it was just like, let's give a broad snapshot. So that's a good idea, maybe just to take that first part out, since we are only concentrating on EL and special ed cross subsidy. So it's a good idea.
Zach, I'm confused about, so I saw the document and I said, okay, he's telling us, but this is not the telling us document, it's a document that is going to be presented. What's the goal of the document?
Same goal as always is to present to our local, any state representative, House member, or senator who touches our district. Right? They're our local representatives.
So this is meant to be handed to a representative, to our legislator. And we want the legislator just by reading this to get it.
Correct.
Okay. I think that we need to work on it.
Well, so I did send an email out, and I apologize if you didn't get it. Please let me know if you didn't.
No, I did get it.
Okay, I didn't.
I did not understand the goal of the document.
Okay, And I didn't, I'm happy to make any changes.
Yep.
I just didn't hear back.
Don't we formally adopt this every year
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the fall?
so,
I like the, when we took away, we had a few little tiny things that we were adding to it, and it really distracted to the big picture, and if you give us that doesn't really appreciate it, but this is what we're talking about. So the concept that we're only, the special education and the EL cross-subsidy, I like that format. As for the charter school comment, that's kind of coming from a different avenue, right? So it's not, I mean, yes, that's important to us, but it doesn't need to be present here. Are we correct on that? Because it's,
there's
we kind of
definitely
handed
part
the
of,
baton, in our opinion, off to elsewhere. So we want
Yeah.
this.
so I mean, that was part of, when we've had discussions about whether to add that yet, and those efforts are genuine and awesome, and I think they're in a good place.
Yes.
And once they're more formulated and we have more direction and maybe some other partners in other areas of the state, that makes a lot of sense. Because, again, our district is hit by that much more so than other districts.
Uh-huh.
We did consider that. But I think Al's efforts and others are getting a little more time, more formality before if you want to say more about that.
I think it's right to just keep special education and EL cross-subsidy on here and just stay laser focused on that because that's going to get the attention. I feel like the efforts that are being put in on charter schools is, from my standpoint, is because it is an issue, but it's not being talked about. And I wanted to find a avenue to get people to start talking about it and see if we couldn't get some buzz in the legislature to start to address some of those issues. But I don't think that as a board, we should be standing up saying our number one priority is focused on the charter school issues.
And I mean, the language in here that everybody kind of pointed out, it is complicated. And now that the changing of what free and reduced lunch means, but we don't have any other measure yet. So this is kind of what we're working. I'm more than happy to just kind of remove that if we think it distracts from the goal. Because I would say right off the bat, it kind of does.
Let's jump Heather and then Natalie. And then Al.
I don't know that it needs to be removed. I think it can be reworked because I think that it does provide context of, for the general layperson or public, why does it matter, and then how does it impact other students? Because right now, that's not necessarily clear if you haven't done your homework on it, which a lot of people haven't necessarily, and that's just the way it is. But I think if you lead with, and we can certainly help with rewording, if you lead with the unique district, and I might add that we celebrate a unique district. I think there's some language that we could include that says that's a value add for St. Cloud, but lead with the special education and the EL student, and then wrap in, as Al had said, that as a result, when the monies are decreased from the general fund, that has further impact on a district that already sees tension and demand based upon socioeconomics, which is the free and reduced lunch. So I wouldn't remove it. I would rework the wording.
So I wasn't thinking we would need to rework it, but now with folks saying, well, how about this and how about this? Maybe, I really liked what you said, Zach, when you said this isn't enough. Like, thank you, and we still need X. So maybe that could be more of what is in that first paragraph of some history here, like, thanks, and now, here's our next expectation for you to actually follow through with everything. So I don't know that the bottom needs to be changed, but maybe we can bring some history into the first part.
And I did change what the opening was despite recent efforts. I mean, I could elaborate on that
Yeah.
easily.
I'm not, you're definitely not wanting to wordsmith it for you, but I'm just wondering if we can, despite recent efforts, and make that a little bit more well-known. Yeah.
A couple of years back, I had the opportunity to go down and present in front of the Education Committee at the Capitol. And I just wanted to comment that this is a very misunderstood, the special education cross subsidy is a very misunderstood, and it's a very misunderstood concept, and it's a very, a lot of the commentary or a lot of the efforts put in towards it are misdirected in that people believe in this. This happened at the Education Committee at that particular, it was a meeting of the committee to talk about the effects of the special education cost subsidy. And I think there was 5 or 6 people that were there to present. And the first 3 all presented on special interest, special education causes. That we really need this, you know, we really need special education funding because we need this for in our special education. My son, my daughter has special needs and there's never enough funding for what they need. And that is not the basis for the special education cost subsidy argument. The argument, if there is no real argument, but the concept of it is that special education is mandated and we must provide it. So we are providing the special education services. We are not receiving funding from the state for all of the services that we're providing. So what we're doing is we're taking money out of the general education fund, which goes to pay for regular instruction for all of our other students, non-special education students. And that money is moved into the special education fund. So when we talk about a special education cost subsidy, we're not talking about not having enough money for special education. We're talking about not having enough money for regular instruction, and how that really harms our district, especially when it's to the tune of $15-16 million a year. That's a ton of money. But it's very misunderstood at the local level. It's very misunderstood by the legislators, and it's very misunderstood by the people who go and lobby for the legislation surrounding it. So I'll leave it at that.
Why wouldn't we have a number for, instead of increasing special education funding to a point that fully funds the state share? Why wouldn't we put a number there?
I think it's because it's just always changing,
Percentage?
dollar-wise.
No, I mean, I'm not sure that that is a good advocacy line, because it doesn't set an expectation. I mean, even if it's changing, I think that it should have a number. It should have a name, because that our legislature is not going to know how much is that digging into any budget. We're inviting them to do math, and they won't do that. And I'm not telling you, I mean, I guess.
That makes sense. I mean, it would make it a little cleaner.
Yeah.
The number, $1 billion, couple, throughout the state, several. And it's different number in different people's eyes too. But we just cite where our numbers come from and easily put that in there. The state, are you talking about the state, overall state numbers? State funding for special education.
Well, I think that depends, yeah, if you're talking to the state legislator, that would be a state funding. I think that we need to make a better case in terms of numbers. And maybe we can get some help. What?
That's the question though, right? Is are we asking, what the state won't do is only fund our cross-education, cross-subsidy, right? So are we figuring out the money for all of the state? And is that our ask? And, when the way that we've gotten this traction with Al going down there and with other, with MSBA and I don't know, the other 4 acronym thing, ACDA is American Choral Directors Association. That's all I can think of. What's the other one? It's MSBA and AMSD. Thank you. When everybody kind of joined on board, it was the full state doing it, and that's why we're here. We may have started it, but then, so the question is, do we just continue to advocate for us, or do we now bring it to the more broad level and say, you did X, and now we need 2X? I don't have the answer. I'm just talking out loud.
So I think I would be very hesitant to put a statewide number, right? Because we don't know what that is after the new funding. I think maybe to clarify what we're asking, the way the state has approached the first part of the issue is through that cross-subsidy reduction aid, which used to be 6%, is now 44%. So if we want to be clear about what the ask is, we could say increase the cross-subsidy reduction aid to 100%. We're saying that there should be no cross-subsidy. That funding needs to fund 100% of people's cross-subsidy. Then that's clear, specifically what the ask is and how we think as a district they should do it.
That makes sense, because I'm just looking at the legislative report from 2020. It's estimated, right? And at that point in time, the fiscal year 2025 was $3.3 billion statewide. But that's changed. 100% percentage. You want a percentage? I like it.
Yeah, the funding percent is locked in, right? That's how the statute is written, is it's funding 44%, and then that 44% is set to go up to 50% in fiscal 26. But then right now, that's where it caps, right? So we're saying that that should be going up to 100% to fully fund.
And regarding to my earlier comment, so I didn't mean to say that you were not doing what you were supposed to be doing. I just meant to say that I wasn't understanding what I was supposed to be doing. But my suggestion about that is not really about the content per se. It's really about the form, because I like this document to be something that we will hand somebody and then leave there. And I just was wondering if we can just maybe get some help from Tammy to format it in a different way. What? It doesn't have to be flashy. It's not flashy when I'm looking for it, but just like a different, she knows.
This is awkward and cumbersome, and then I did widen the margins, so. So it could fit on one page.
Okay. Are we feeling good about the slight adjustments there and?
I think so. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and redo some stuff, send it out for our next meeting, yeah.
Okay, so make sure everybody looks at that, and if they have any comments, to reach back out to Zach. If you're looking at, is that what you felt we talked about? So I think we feel pretty good about it. All right, thank you very much. Yep, go ahead.
Is that in an advocacy, is any difference, and maybe Amy, you know about this, in what we should be saying about EL and special education? I mean, they are together then, it's like a one ask, but it sounds like it should be two ask, or two different lines within the same ask?
I mean, I think the wording might be different, right? Because the EL the way the EL funding is it's set a little bit different than the cross-subsidy reduction aid, but that would be the same concept, right? To fully fund our costs and to cover 100% of the cross-subsidy. So, I mean, I think they can be lumped together or they can be separate. It really doesn't necessarily matter. We don't currently list our EL numbers in there, do we? Or we don't have the EL cross-subsidy numbers in there.
Statewide,
We listed in the budget.
Right, but I'm wondering if we're including EL funding in our legislative platform, that might be something that we want to add as well, to list our, just like we do for the special ed, our current FY24 EL budget is, our expected cross-subsidy is. So we can get that and get that added as well.
Okay.
I do have a question for the board. In terms of a strategy and in terms of what we're asking, it just seems like, for me, EL deserves kind of a separate spot within the document, like an explanation as well, as we had been doing so much efforts in explaining special education. But I think that that's a question about a strategy, not about. So in terms of our strategy of how we're going to present this and how we go this, should it be separate? Should it be together within the same document, within the same asset, of course?
It has been, EL and special education, it has been kind of lumped together when people are talking about these numbers. And the other thing is ELL numbers have gone up significantly statewide as well. So we're not alone in that. Again, they're both mandates that fit well together. So I think, but yeah.
Go ahead, Al.
Amy, do we track EL in the same way that I mean, are things coded? Do we know what the mandated costs of EL are?
So EL is a little bit different, right? There's not as much in statute in terms of mandates. There's recommended guidelines, right? MDE will come in and say this is what you should do, but it doesn't have as much statutory weight behind it as some of the special education requirements. So there's more flexibility. You're going to see more variance from district to district in terms of what they use for staffing ratios and how much they spend, and what that cross-subsidy looks like. There's more, I would say, district discretion in deciding how big that number gets based on, the needs of your students that you're trying to serve. So again, we do know what our costs are, right? The revenue and the expenses are definitely tracked separately, and so we know what that is. And we do know that the EL is a little bit different, right? If they were to fully fund EL costs at what the state recommends, that would go beyond what our cross-subsidy is. Because we know if we were to take and the state were, say, use a 1:25 ratio or whatever it might be, we know we're not there because of funding limitations. So there's kind of two pieces to the EL. We have a cross-subsidy on the existing, what we have used, resources to cover and the staffing models and the supports that we've been able to do. But there's also a need for additional EL funding beyond that to truly meet the needs and do the things that MDE are saying are best from a best practices standpoint. So they are a little bit separate in terms of, the way that you would approach that conversation.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, Amy, what you're saying, so there's a very easy 44% to 50%, we want 100% for special education, but there's not that same percentage for EL, because it's based on what MDE suggests that you do, not what statute says to do.
So the current funding is based on what people are doing today, right? So they ran the numbers and said, we're going to cover the percent of the cross subsidy of what people have today. But that's still not real, even if they fully funded that cross subsidy, that to Al's point earlier about, we're really taking money from elsewhere within the budget to support those costs. Right now, we use compensatory funding for a lot of that could be used for, lowering class sizes or other things that meet that compensatory definition. So the way it's written now and what they're doing is providing a mechanism to fill that funding shortfall that currently exists, but districts are not spending and generally putting the resources to EL that are consistent with those best practices guidelines just because the funding limitation is there. And there isn't a statutory, you know, a series of statutes like there is with special ed that is much more prescriptive about here's the things you need to do, you know, here's the services you need to provide. That just doesn't exist in EL in that same way.
But the nice thing is that MDE is telling us what we should do, or what would be best practice to do, and that's a state agency, so we can say,
The difference is that there isn't that recourse for penalty if you don't comply, right? MDE can say you should do a 1-to-20 ratio. We can come and say our budget supports a 1-to-100 ratio.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that, but in theory, a district could do that, and there wouldn't be any repercussion to them from a compliance standpoint. MDE would come in and say, that's not best practice. We suggest you lower that, but there's not going to be any actual, you know, penalty or any sort of, you know, due process claim in the same way that if we're not meeting the needs of a special education student, that's a whole different process that triggers.
so it seems like the state, in general, the legislature has seemed to understand more the cross subsidy for special education, but I don't know that I've heard that same knowledge about the EL. I didn't even have that knowledge until right now. So I'm wondering, thanks to Monica again, asking the question, like, now do we need to, maybe the goal is still the same goal, but really there needs to be more education maybe on the EL cross subsidy because it's a different funding formula. I don't know. I just wonder if our legislatures get that, what Amy just said. Like they kind of get the special education cross subsidy now.
Well, I think the ones that get the special education cross subsidy get the EL, that is, we're stealing out of this pot to pay for this, so could you please fund these appropriately?
I think they get the concept, but I think, I don't know that every district that has this vested interest in our special education programming has the vested interest in EL. So there might be more fight for EL, for cross subsidy for special ed than there is for EL. So we might have to do more heavy lifting because that's our role in the state, apparently, to do heavy lifting on EL. So that's, yeah. Again, Amy just writes it. I mean, like, obviously, everything's fine. And Tammy makes it look great. So it's really good.
Monica?
Natalie, that's why I'm saying that that's a question of a strategy. I'm pretty sure that nobody knows this. I mean, we hardly know it, and we're part of the board of education. So, so I don't know that it's about, probably yes, our role is educating everybody, but not, but I think that the question is about a strategy, and I will yield to Zach more about what do you think that the strategy should be, because maybe we should just focus one and leave the other one kind of tagging along as it is going right now is a better strategy than trying to educate everybody and kind of pick a different fight. Or maybe this is a good thing, we can put them together. So what's your opinion is what I was asking.
From a strategy perspective, I think there is some value in separating the two a little bit, because from what I'm hearing in the explanation that Amy provided, because we can better define special education, and that's the pot that we're mandated to manage, even that is impacting for schools the ability for them to invest in EL. So there's pressure on the general student, but there's pressure on EL as well. And in the state, I mean, I think that it's important for us to leverage that message, because in the state of Minnesota, where we are known for having one of the widest achievement gaps because of diversity population, and particularly around English language learners, and that population is growing and it's spreading to more demographic, I mean, to more communities. If they don't address it now, it's only going to get worse over time. And one of the goals of the state is to decrease the achievement gap, which is hard to do if you're not recognizing what the pressure and the demands are on your different sources of funding. And I do think the education around that, particularly given the reserves that the state has, forming that and trying to strategize so that they're thinking about it as they look at surplus might be a benefit.
Both were addressed with some additional funding though, right? Okay. So at least they're on the radar. which we haven't seen before. Monica?
So I think that one thing that could help us and help Tammy, especially looking at this, is, and I want to ask you again, is what messages we wanted to get across. And Heather, you just said about, I just hear you saying, we're talking here, well, I guess the overall message is about insufficient funding for education in general that impact everybody. So that's the one message. But you're talking about a decreasing achievement gap. That is one other thing. The other message is that about that achievement gap that you said is that the EL population is just going to increase statewide. So that's kind of another message. What other messages we wanted to put there that are going to be helpful for our advocacy?
Can I say one more thing about the funding? If we're going to give more detailed information about the funding ask, the cap out of years of service for EL is hugely problematic too. And that's part of what's creating the cross subsidy for a number of districts, particularly those who have the new to country students who come with no formalized education. We only get a funding for an EL student for 7 years. So if someone comes when they're in 4th grade and have never written or read in any formalized language, and they need more than 7 years of service to catch up, we keep them enrolled, right? We keep servicing them, but they don't generate any revenue. Now, the cross-subsidy aid should help that, right? Because we're still claiming costs for that. But that's, a different way to do it. And, just another advocacy is that would bring additional revenue as well if those students remained eligible for more than the 7-year period.
Do you know why there's that 7 year? Like, what in the
I
world?
believe that's what's in the statute. So whenever the EL and
New things
base
to be
funding
angry
was
about,
set,
okay.
that's the way the statute reads,
Oh,
is
that's
funding
so
is capped
random.
at 7, you get 7 ADM worth. So it's
Yeah,
not 7
yeah.
school years, right? If somebody comes mid-year,
Yeah.
they have until they hit that 7th year, and then it flags it as being ineligible for funding.
Thanks for telling us that.
Part of that, Natalie, is that research says that students who are EL will usually acquire that language acquisition in about 5 to 7 years. But that's not all students. And for our students who are newer to country, it might take longer. And we'll continue to service them even if they haven't tested out per se. And that can go beyond the 7 years. Yeah, a lot of those will be select students.
I'm going to go very elementary. When you talk about the services that are provided, so over that course of the 7 years, what does that look like for early on? I mean, what do EL services look like for various students as they go through that progression?
And it can look very different based on where they come in. So as a kindergartner, some students are going to come in and when they're tested, they may test relatively high. And so their instruction will possibly be co-teaching. We're in the classroom and they have another teacher, an EL teacher in there side by side with the regular education teacher. For some students though, if they're starting with very little English skills or really starting on their language acquisition, their score is going to be lower. So they'll have more sheltered instruction where they'll be just with an EL teacher for maybe 1 hour out of the day, 1.5 hours out of the day. When Natalie alludes to our students who are SLIFE, they might even need a little bit longer. When they're coming in the secondary as SLIFE students or RAIL students, which are recently arrived EL learners, we're really working hard to figure out how are we going to ensure that they're going to have a possibility of acquiring enough credits so that they can graduate either on our 4-year plan or possibly even a 7-year plan. But it's really that we call LTELs, which is long-term EL learners, those students who are coming in 1st or 2nd grade who were possibly needing more than 7 years. And during that time frame, they may get partially sheltered instruction. They might move into more co-teaching instruction where they're in the classroom more and trying to graduate out. But for each student, it truly is different.
Doesn't the education level of the parents make a difference too? I mean, you may come to the country where no one from your family speaks any English, but if you come, say you're a Russian-speaking, both of your parents are highly educated professionals in Russia, and you move to this country, wouldn't that student find it easier than a Somali-speaking student who has not been exposed to an education system and their parents have not been exposed to formalized education? Is the learning curve the same for both, or would one tend to find it? And I don't know if the question is relevant or not, but
The research would indicate that the higher level of proficiency that you have in both reading, writing, listening, reading and listening, and then writing, your higher level proficiency in your native language, the more likely it is that you'll acquire the English skills faster. So to your point, the answer is yes, but oftentimes that doesn't necessarily have to be correlated with where a parent's level of proficiency is, because so many of our students are gaining skills even through media and through television, so that that's not always a true predictor, but it can be a correlate.
level of exposure would be higher, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, that would be accurate.
I just wanted to say on that too, that, you know, like the Somali language has only been a written language since the 70s. Am I right on that? So like there's other factors too with why someone may be able to read and write coming to this country and why not, just depending on the country, you know?
I mean, and many of our Somali-speaking students speak many other languages also.
But in that topic, what I know, maybe I'm all in what I know, but it depends the age of the kid, depends on the schooling that the kid has had before. And the fact that the parents are educated is more about the support that they can give than the ability of the kid to learn. So there are a bunch of things.
Lots of variables that play into that.
Okay, we learned a lot here. Thank you. It'll be on the YouTube channel if you need to listen to it again.
Any other message?
Okay, are we good then? Thank you. All good.
Come back one more. No, does this come back one more time for adoption then, or does it come back? When do we have to have it adopted by? Okay.
Next meeting, it's an action item. Okay, all right, thanks, Zach, appreciate it. Okay, then we are moving on to reports. Board of Education Standing Committee reports. I believe that we only have one Board Development Policy Governance Committee Chair, Scott Andreasen.
The Board Development Committee met on October 25th, 2023. The committee was joined by Assistant Superintendents Dr. Rivard and Dr. Harris, along with the Director of Technology and Innovation, Ryan Cox. The committee reviewed Board Policy 524, Internet Responsible Use and Safety Policy, and the committee had no recommended changes to the policy after reviewing it. Board Policy 624, Online Instruction, was reviewed with a minor change in the title of the policy. 624 was included in the consent agenda this evening. Thank you, and that's our report.
And no other reports, correct? Okay, thank you. Then we have future agenda items. November regular board meeting topics will include the Katherine Johnson Education Center and Roosevelt Education Center school presentations, audit report, new course proposals, approval of the 2024 Board of Education legislative platform, approval of tentative agreements, if any, and policy readings. At this time, does any board member wish to suggest a future agenda item? All right, moving along. Now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's Board of Education meeting. And do I have a second?
Second.
Everybody wants to stay here? I have a motion by Scott, a second by Zach. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So the work session, or a Board of Education meeting is adjourned at 7:26 PM, and we are opening up the Board of Education work session. First up, we have Safe and Secure Schools. And we have Gary Angie, Executive Director of Operations, and Joel Heitkamp, Principal of South Junior High School, presenting tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to visit a little bit about school safety this evening. Joel and I are going to tag team this. It's going to feel like a tennis match. We're going to be going back and forth here. So we focus our work and decisions around the strategic plan with all our decisions in the district. So we're starting with the strategic plan this evening when we talk about school safety. And as we all know, as part of the strategic plan, school safety is addressed, ensuring every school and district facility is safe and welcoming. The pieces of what we're going to, pieces of the presentation tonight, we're going to talk about the Strategic Plan Safety Subcommittee that was formed last year. We're going to talk about EPAC. That's our committee with community partners that we've talked about in the past. We're going to talk about the preparations and drills that we've been doing. We're also going to address some of our practices, some of the layering that we have for school safety. And then we're going to wrap it up to share with you about a grant award that we received for school safety.
All right. The Strategic Plan Subcommittee is a small yet comprehensive group of individuals that gets together on a fairly regular basis to make sure that we are staying up to date with everything we need to do to make sure our buildings and our areas stay safe. Membership in that group includes principals at multiple levels and then district level directors. We were able to use a tool that Gary and I think were the only two that were at the training. We attended a training last March where FEMA partnered with Waite Park at the Ledge, and they gave us a tool that allowed us to help prioritize levels of severity of things that could happen, and if those things did happen, what scope would we have to monitor to support that event. And so we utilized the action planning documents that are in the administrator's handbook and went through that process. And when we went through that process, our top three emergency plans that we felt needed to be addressed most directly and most currently were active threat, elopement, and mental health. We'll talk specifically on active threat. That's the one we've spent the most time on in just a little bit. Elopement is one that we've seen a greater need of in our schools in the last handful of years. Typically, that's more of an elementary concern, but we're seeing it in our middle schools and somewhat in our high schools. And then we've really addressed the mental health concerns coming out of the pandemic with mental health advocates, general education social workers at our middle schools, and then the expansion of our family advocates to support all the way to the families. Oh, sorry. Elopement meaning students that exit our buildings, right, without permission, without a family member, for various reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us thought that when we first heard the word, so don't feel bad. Yeah. So I mentioned EPAC earlier. EPAC is our Emergency Preparation Advisory Committee. This group has been meeting over 10 years, and it's a group of district staff, building staff, and most importantly, first responders, community folks. And it is exactly what it says. It's an advisory committee. We meet the first Thursday of every month. The membership from the community, I've never been on a committee where folks have been more faithful of attending. The majority of the committee are folks that started with us over 10 years ago, and they're there every single month. So tomorrow morning at 7:30, they'll join us. We throw some topics out. We talk about what we're doing, and mainly we listen to get the perspective of our first responders and community helpers. Membership are first responders, all the law enforcement agencies. We have Mayo Ambulance, we have Stearns County Emergency Management, we have State Fire Marshal's Office, we have Dispatch. I'm forgetting one. We have a lot of people. Okay, let's leave it with that. And then some district folks. And then we, as Joel mentioned, ever since we formed the strategic planning subcommittee, we've made a commitment that each month we're going to have a focus. And Joel had mentioned the top three. We've been working on active threat. Out of active threat, we've actually been working on that for a few years. We've come up with a common language that's used across the community so that it doesn't matter if you're a Crossroads Mall or Centricare or a District 742 school, shelter in place and active threat means the same. Tomorrow, our monthly focus are going to be elopement and mental health. So. Joe, we're locked up here. Try it one more time. There we go.
I'm really proud of the work we've done around active threats. There's a small group of us that were able to really collaborate to make sure that the messaging and the learning that was happening in our buildings was common across all of our system. And so within the last year and a half, we've presented and rolled out 5 common tabletop drill discussions for all of our buildings. They are leveled. So we have a set for our elementary level. We have another set for our secondary level. So they are appropriate for age. And those all went through that advisory committee. That committee was able to give feedback before they were rolled out. And so it really did go through all of those steps to make sure that we were giving the correct message to everyone. New legislation has come out this year in regards to those active threats. And we've taken steps to make sure that we meet that. We have planned this year that all of our drills will happen in all of our buildings on the same days throughout the course of the year. So as building leaders, we know when those are going to happen. They may happen at different times during the day, but all of our families know that on a given day, those are the days that are going to happen. And we've messaged those dates out to families. Also embedded into that legislation is that there's an opt-out for families, so they have that opportunity. Which is why we gave them all of the dates ahead of time. And then lastly, embedded into that legislation is that as a building, we're going to be mindful knowing that these discussions can sometimes elicit certain emotions in our students. And so having the mental health supports there for them is also a part of it. So our mental health advocates, our counselors are readily available on those days. Yeah, that's what I've got.
So some of the practices that we have around school safety, as you know, and as you have supported over the years, we have worked to get our schools with controlled entrances so that we can route visitors into the office areas without coming into the school. We have one school where we're still working on that. That's Apollo, and that's addressed with a monitor at the door. So we do have some control there, but we're still working to get that school completed. This year, we concentrated on badges, and I know all of you received new badges, but over the years, we've had schools that have branded their own badges. We've had
staff that may have had multiple badges. And to be secure, we really needed to take a look at badges so that when you see someone in the hallway, you know if they should be in that building or not. So we've gone with a common badge. These will be refreshed every year with a different color. We'll have our community partners that are working in our schools with a certain badge too. It's just easy to identify as they're coming down the hallway. We still have some work to do on that. Some of the photos are old and people don't look like they did when they had their photo taken. So we have a committee that's continuing to work on how can we get the pictures refreshed as well. The other thing we do is it's around background checks. If you walk into a school building as a visitor, you'll be scanned into the Raptor system. It's using an ID, and what that does, it checks the databases in 50 states for crimes against children. And we'll come back with a report on that before that individual can come into the school. We also have, we require background checks of all staff as they're hired, our partners that work in our schools, and our volunteers.
I was excited today to lead a staff professional development on this similar topic. I gave this very similar presentation to them as an overview of everything that's in place district-wide to really support school safety across the entire system. But we did spend a bigger chunk of our time. We had 2 hours together today, and we spent an hour and a half with a sergeant from the St. Cloud Police Department going through various tabletop, again, discussions and scenarios. And although our group was small, it was some of the fastest time that you can ever imagine because they've got great insights, they've got great questions. Our group was made up of both licensed and non-licensed staff. And after every one of these we've ever done, they say, boy, you know, this group needs it more, or we should really do this again. And this was the second time we've provided the opportunity. We did it system-wide a year ago in August. And now we're rolling them out this way as people, again, move into the system. A great opportunity to continue that conversation and continue to make people feel comfortable, to empower them when something may go wrong, and know what to do with confidence if they should ever be in that space.
And this, we recently found out that we were awarded a Stopping School Violence grant from the Department of Justice. We're really excited about this. Over the past number of years, we've been working with a local technology company on a concept that they have for mapping buildings and then tying that into the 911 system. And when we first started looking at this company was working on the Super Bowl when it was in Minneapolis, and they were doing work with that. Last Monday, 2 days ago, I had the opportunity to go down to Stearns County Dispatch to see what it looks like. And they called up a call from Costco, and you get a Google Map image of that. You know, we've all been on Google Maps, the satellite image, and it puts a dot right in the middle of the building. So a first responder coming doesn't know where to go at Costco. Then we had someone do a pre-planned, it was all set, so dispatch, 911 call from a cell phone at Tech High School. As you know, landline phones are easier to find where they are. Cell phones become more difficult. And we were able to see that the caller made the call right outside of Principal Kenzie's office, and we could see the caller walking. And so it was quite different looking at those two images. So what the grant will give us, it will be the company that we're working with has done Apollo and Tech for the mapping, but this will enable us to do all of the schools across the whole system. It will provide that interface with the 911 system. It will provide an interface with our school access points. That's what helps us narrow that down to that exact location. And then it will provide us a mobile interface where we can communicate with staff during during an event. We can get them information if we need to evacuate. It's a place to get class rosters and contact information, things like that. It'll provide us some training on the things that I just talked about. It'll provide us some training for staff on situational awareness and on threat assessment. And our total grant award is $855,000, $880. That's over 3 years. The majority of it will go to technology, but a little over 300,000 will be for some of those other things I talked about. With that, we'll take questions.
Natalie?
Thanks, guys, for bringing this to us. I have two things. I talked with Gary, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and I said, hey, a parent messaged me on Facebook, and there's this grant we could apply for. And he looked at me, he's like, oh yeah, that's the grant we already got. So that's his grant today. So I told the parent, apparently they're on it, and we already have one. So that was pretty cool. How does it work with background checks after someone gets hired? So I know we have very long time staff that are with us in our district, but is there like a cycle, like every 3 years, or how, or is it only at the hiring that people that work with kids in our district are given a background check? Sorry. Staff, yeah.
People like me who were hired decades ago.
The
Yeah.
background check statute allows us to do that at the time of hire only, and so they get that one at the time of hire.
Per statute, you're saying? Okay. So how would we, okay. Do you see my, yeah. So if something happened, we would be aware of it. How would we become aware of it if we didn't do a background check and they didn't tell us? Is it through law enforcement or through, yeah, through partnerships? Okay. Thank you.
Would law enforcement necessarily run people through background checks? I mean, how do you connect that? So if a staff member is involved in something, how do they know to look for it if it's not a practical background check or by luck?
It would be more if law enforcement was working on a crime that we needed to know about. It wouldn't be their background check, but it would be something that happened. Yes.
Gary, on that mapping system, does it know first floor, second floor? Or is it just?
The technology will do that by being able to tell the signal from the access point. It's not quite 3D, they're getting there. It's still a 2D image, but it will tell you first or second floor depending upon that signal. The area that I'm most interested in are our learning communities over at Tech, because you can be standing on first floor and see 4 access points upstairs. And so that's the one that personally I'm focusing on to see how it works there.
Does the system itself cover just buildings, or is it buildings and grounds?
Anywhere that we have an access point, and so that's one of the things that we're looking at. If we have a situation where we have to evacuate, the incident may have been in the building, but the event becomes the whole campus. And so we're looking at how can we get coverage there so that we know that we have resources over here and resources over there.
I was wondering if you could tell me about the Crisis Prevention Institute for Nonviolent Crisis Intervention?
I might need to see that, Scott. Yeah. Oh, Mike, okay, thank you.
So Scott, the non-crisis or Crisis Prevention Institute is an organization that we've probably worked with for well over 30 years. It utilizes training for our staff on both how to verbally work with students when they're dysregulated and moving towards maybe some challenges with controlling themselves or putting harm out towards themselves or other folks. It also has a component of their training where we're learning about restrictive procedures in terms of holding on to students and making sure we're keeping them safe that way.
Is this something that all of our teachers go through?
Our special education teachers go through this. A lot of our special education paraprofessionals will also go through it. General education teachers may go through it when they're working with their building principal, but primarily our special education staff are going through this opportunity.
Okay, we've been doing this for many years. Apparently, this institute trains instructors. And then what, we're hiring instructors to teach our people, or how's that work?
No, right now we have approximately 6 instructors, which are part of our staff. So back in the day, I was an instructor. So 6 to 7 times a year, I would have teachers or paraprofessionals coming and having training with me. And we would spend 3 nights, 2 to 3 nights going through the nonverbal component. And then we would also, or excuse me, the verbal component. And then we would spend 1 evening going through the procedures for if we had to do restraints with students.
Okay, so these are people on our staff that have been certified?
That's correct. So they go through a certification process every 2 to 3 years.
Okay. As you can see, this security stuff is of interest to the board. And the board provides oversight. It was kind of interest to me too. For the past 3 years, I'm semi-retired. I get to sit in on all kinds of stuff. And usually just quietly in the background. And then if there's something of interest, I'll talk with the administration, be it yourself or the superintendent or one of the other assistant soups. Often it's to give, hey, this is a good deal, or hey, maybe a little tweaking here and there. One of the things I've done over the past 3 years is sit in on professional education classes. And most of our boring is all get out. But at times, instructors have recognized me. Usually they don't. But they're really professional folks. And they teach their classes, and there's no problem. Recently, I took an interest in this CPI nonviolent crisis intervention, and it's not something you just sit in on. It's something you have to sign up for ahead of time. And for some reason, they said no. What are they hiding?
That, I think we can bounce that over here, because I don't think anybody's hiding anything.
Yeah, I'd be glad to answer that. You and I had discussed this at great length multiple times. And the reason that we asked that board members not attend that training is that it is a mixture of our non-licensed and licensed staff, and it's led by non-administrators. You have been very welcomed, as is the board, to trainings where our professional directors and executive directors led those trainings. And we have the great opportunity to get to know you guys better in a different way. So for us to be in conversation and leading workshops in partnership with any of you feels maybe a little more collaborative. As you know, as the whole board probably feels, when you are in a space, you carry a different weight with you, right? Even if you're just sitting in the back. And in spaces where real learning can occur, people have to feel really comfortable taking risks. And in in these kinds of conversations, particularly for our non-licensed staff, that, right, it's not about you, it's not about any of you, right, it's about the title that you hold. And that doesn't always feel, again, not about you, right, but it doesn't always feel comfortable or safe. And sometimes people might wonder, well, why are they here? Am I doing something wrong? And so the reason I asked that you not join this training, though I did suggest that if sometimes there are all administrator CPI trainings, that might be a good place for you to observe. But the ones that are for our staff probably aren't. That was my recommendation.
Thank you.
Of course.
I'll join the staff.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Heather?
You talked about obviously dealing with mental health of students as you work through all of this. Can you talk a little bit about the mental health of staff? I mean, obviously across the country, one of the national issues is teacher retention and the pressure they feel around school safety. Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing teachers respond to the additional pressure or fear of what's happening nationally?
The one part I missed that I should have given more clarity on is that the drills, as they call them in statute, ours are actually tabletop discussions, and we've taken all of the burden off of our staff of presenting those. I do ours at South as a live stream. Every building does them a little bit different. Some do it live, some do it recorded. But taking that one piece off has really eased staff as they get to be more of a learner in that moment as opposed to being the leader of that conversation and not always feeling comfortable. I think unfortunately, and when I talk to staff individually, the commonality of these types of situations happening, the one recently now in Maine, has almost desensitized some of our folks. And so I think everyone knows that while we don't want it to happen, we need to be prepared, and our staff has been very open to those conversations, and that's been evident in the conversations and professional development we held last August at all of our buildings in conjunction with our SROs, and then the one that I was able to hold with a small group today after school. Their engagement shows that they're ready and willing to be a part of the solution.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks. Then we're moving on to schools update, presented by our fabulous three here. Nikki Hansen, Assistant Superintendent for PK through 5 Education, Dr. Jason Harris, Assistant Superintendent of Education, and Dr. Mike Rivard, Assistant Superintendent of E through 12 Education Services.
Good evening, Superintendent Putnam and board members. Tonight for our elementary update, we get to hear from our Lincoln All-Stars. When asked about strengths, Principal Ebnett celebrated academic rigor and high expectations at Lincoln from their staff for their students. She also celebrated and was very proud of hosting welcome meetings for all new families. She stated that this helps to create a caring environment where students and families feel like they belong and they are celebrated from the first day they enter the building. Some of the highlights for Lincoln include SEL lessons that are taught each week in every classroom, a student council process that promotes student leadership, and this year's student council is down on the right, daily student jobs to participate and contribute to their school community, PBIS assemblies to celebrate success, Students of the Month to highlight Lincoln Scholars, and Young Scholars into DOS programming for enrichment, and she says, oh, so much more.
Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, board members. No one site for secondaries this session. We have multiple sites. Elementary has a lot of schools, so we have to spread our 5 secondary schools out throughout the months. One of the things that stood out this month, it was Unity Month. And October 18th was secondary schools participate in this around kindness, acceptance, and inclusion in the communities. This is another aspect of safety, getting to know your staff, your students, taking part in a cause. It helps create those environments. You see some of the students taking a pledge around the kindness, inclusion, and acceptance, and you see the staff that wore orange. Right dead in the middle Principal Heitkamp and South Junior High focused on the Courage Retreat, where it talked about how do we stop bullying, how do we get to know each other, how do we learn with one another, and the Courage Retreat was led by Youth Frontiers. And this was just another testament, just for our staff, our students, our communities. It's just a lot of great things taking place. And when I do this update, I deal with all types of stuff every day, but when I went through this slide deck today, it really highlighted all the great things that are going on in our community. And sometimes we don't talk about it enough, but just in these slides, and I went to these buildings, I saw what was taking place. It just gives you a real good feel of what's taking place with our staff and our students. So just, it's a proud day to be a 742 staff member, student, community member, because it's a lot of great things taking place. And so this was focused on climate and culture. If you go to the next slide, a lot of great things. It was College Awareness Month, and both high schools had a college fair. You had over 50 colleges throughout the state to come to our schools, both of the high schools, to help kids get exposed to post-secondary education, looking at universities really in an impactful way, right in our gyms and our media centers. And when you look at the middle photo, we had the EPIC event last Friday where you had multiple industry partners really talk about career options and interests for our students in the career world, where we had over probably our 10th and 11th graders, both high schools, Apollo Tech, McKinley, somewhere over 700 students participated from our school in the midst of, I think, 4,000 students took place in the EPIC event last Saturday. One of the things, and down in the bottom middle, was this a mobile, what do they call this? It's a mobile ideas trailer, and you can get in the trailer. It teaches you bungee, all types of things around safety. MnDOT is a part of this, and it was really fascinating. It can just pop up in your parking lot and then really work with kids on exposure to multiple things. And then the last one with the college fair activities was a big one. Shout out to Tech Boys soccer team. They made it down to the semifinals. They lost today against Hill Murray. They play tomorrow. One of the things from one of the ranking Minnesota High School League members, it was a shootout last week at White Bear Lake. I was next to your son watching that. And one of the things after the shootout, one of the members said, Tech won in the shootout, but they also should get a sportsmanship award for all the great things that they did. Soccer gets rough and pushing and shoving, and that was real big to hear from the Minnesota High School League and the representative that was there to really shout out to our student athletes and how they participated. And it was a big moment. We got a couple of emails from that. And then you see Coach Albrecht. She was Albrecht. She was the coach of the year in AAA. And then Abdi Isse was a first team All-State player. So just a lot of good things going on within our community secondary that we should be proud of, that sometimes gets overshadowed by a lot of different things, but a lot of good stuff taking place within our schools and our community.
Good evening, Chair Hawes, Dr. Putnam, and members of the board. Yes, I'm changing from older kids to younger kids. I couldn't help myself. This evening, I'm going to share with the board a very special and strong program which works with our families, students who are entering the special education system as babies and as toddlers. The group of folks I'm going to talk about is our early childhood special education evaluation team, who work both in our community and at Quarry View to welcome our families into the special education services. Many of those referrals do come from the hospitals or from family pediatricians, but many families in our community are referred to us through Help Me Grow, which is a program sponsored through MDE that starts the referral process for ensuring that our littlest friends are going to receive educational assessments and the supports that they need. Go to the next slide. This group of teachers include occupational therapists, speech-language pathologists, nurses, teachers of the deaf and blind, and mental health professionals who partner with our families as they assess students and try to consider the best interventions for these little ones who are struggling to meet their developmental milestones or are born with medical disabilities. For me, our highlights is the district receives a total of 506 referrals last year. We do an intake on every one of them. Of those, we did full special education evaluations for 201 kids, and 149 of the little folks qualified for special education services in multiple disability areas. We are very proud of the work of our evaluation team at this level. So that's our report for this evening, if there's any questions.
Okay. Heather?
Just one comment. It is fantastic to see Coach Albrecht coaching a boys soccer team. I don't know if people realize how rare it is. It's very common to see men coaching girls at the high school level. It is extremely atypical to see women coaching boys. And I think it's fantastic that she was awarded for that, and certainly for their success. I just think it's a great message for both young boys and young girls that there are opportunities.
All right, thank you. And then this is sort of complicated and clear, all wrapped in one, how we're going to get here to this last item. So now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's work session. Just hang in with me here. Can I get a motion to adjourn the work session? And do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Natalie, a second by Al. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so work session is adjourned at 8:02 PM. And at that same time, I'm reopening tonight's Board of Education regular board meeting. And thank you, at 8:02. And now at 8:02 again, I am closing our board meeting. So the school board is going to move into a closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiation strategy pursuant of Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 2-3. And then we are going to go into a closed session, and when we finish the closed session, we will come back out and open it back up to adjourn the meeting. Nothing else will happen after that. Got it? Painful? Thanks for listening. And everybody else gets to go home.
We're going to stay here?
Casey, I have a question for you. Yep. And I don't want to say this, like, because I'm not quite positive on this, but I